guys, Adam from Ecowise here. I wanted you to hear the cuckoo. That was good, because we were waiting for it and waiting for it, it wasn't doing it. So that's just arrived. Today, well, it arrived about a week ago. I told you before, some of you are following this regularly will know, I said. But today I saw the first swallow. In fact, I heard it and I looked up and it was there. And then 3 others just flew over just up the road here. And they were doing this kind of strange kind of alarm call sound. I looked up and they were flying, chasing a sparrowhawk. And the sparrowhawk was kind of diving down the side of the hill here, trying to flush out birds, because sparrowhawks feed on birds. They predate birds, they're predators. But look at this light coming through here. You can hear the great tit there, right? There's a lot of birds nesting at this time of year. The great tits also, I'm hearing blue tits too. And they both nest in holes in trees, normally holes often left by woodpeckers. Especially in Europe, we've got the greater spotted woodpecker, Picchio maggiore rosso in Italian. And they make the holes, and lots of other birds and animals depend on those holes, even wasps and bees and bats use the holes after the woodpeckers have abandoned them. So they're really important. They're keystone species here. And the birds are starting to behave differently, I'm noticing, now that they're nesting. Sometimes birds, when they start nesting, keep really quiet, and you just don't know they're there, because that's what they're trying to do, not be disturbed, not let you see their nest. Because when they're nesting, they're vulnerable, and obviously the eggs and then the young are vulnerable to predators, including people. So many birds keep quiet and just keep really still, even if you're right next to the nest. Things like sometimes female blackbird brooding or sitting on the eggs, right? But some birds have a different strategy. And I'm just saying this from what I've noticed, right? I've noticed that this time of year, some things like the great tits often come making sounds a bit like that, coming right close to you. And they're like distracting your attention. They're not shy at all. They're coming right in your face. They're coming really close and bouncing around and shouting and screaming and kind of getting your attention, and they lead you off somewhere else, normally away from where the nest is. That's their strategy, right? To protect their nest. But just look at the light coming through. There's these here, there's poplar here, there's tiglio, which is linden or lime tree. There's wild cherry. This is actually a plantation. This has actually been planted about 25 years ago as a truffle, a place where they're hoping truffles are going to come. But it's become a great place for all kinds of wildlife, meantime, especially birds. We've got wrynecks here, which are a kind of little brown looking kind of, they're not really a woodpecker, but they're kind of in that group, but they're really weird, and they can turn their heads, and when they get frightened, if you look at wryneck, look at what a wryneck does when it's frightened. I won't even try describing it. We've got wrynecks here, we've got golden orioles here, they haven't arrived yet, but all kinds of things use this area for nesting. But it's been planted, and before it was different. So whoever planted these trees had an intention. Their intention is, I'm going to plant trees to try cultivating truffles. Now truffles, as most of you, if you're Italian, know, tartufi, are actually fungi, a fungus, right? But they're the fruiting bodies of a particular kind of fungus, but it's almost impossible to cultivate it because they grow in such a close symbiosis. They live so closely with the trees. So about 15 years ago in Piemonte, where I live, in this area of Italy, they had an idea of trying to inoculate the roots of baby trees, so to put the fungus into the roots and then plant them. But it didn't really work because the relationships are so complex in nature. It's very hard to imitate them or even to understand them. So somebody planted these trees, and I think the person that planted the trees went away a long time ago. Maybe they went away because they died, or maybe they went away because they moved somewhere else, but they're not here anymore. So they planted these trees, and these trees have become an amazing habitat. There's a badger set up there. I've seen roe deer here. I've actually seen wolf tracks coming down through here, passing through. But this has become a beautiful, so somebody planted it, and it's become an ecosystem and a habitat and a special place. So gardening, wild nature, cultivated nature, it's hard to sometimes distinguish these things. We'll go a bit further and I want to show you something else, because there's a really cool meadow here. It's just starting to have some its first flush of yellow flowers. Come check it out. So here I am in this beautiful meadow, which is in its first flush of spring color. This beautiful sulphury yellow, look. These are all buttercups. And it's like a whole universe or a galaxy with lots of different suns and solar systems. And me sitting in amongst it. And these are like kind of fireworks shooting out. I don't know if you can see these red. These are sorrel, which is good stuff to eat actually. I use in salad. A rumex species. And this is going to get more and more colorful and more exciting and vibrant in the next few weeks as we get this spring phenomena of the meadows. And like what we talked about, I was just talking about earlier about the trees that somebody had planted there, but yet it's now a habitat and an ecosystem with lots of wild plants and animals and a whole set of relationships and things living and doing there. This is the same. Meadows like this are kind of made by people. I mean, people don't plant them, but people manage them is the word you would use. It's a bit of a dry word, but they kind of garden them. Because if you don't, in a place like this, anywhere in the world where it's not too hot or too dry or perhaps too salty near the sea, anywhere that's not those things will have trees. That will be, it's like in ecology they call it the climax ecosystem. But trees will come here. If this isn't cut for about 2 or 3 years, this will turn into shrubs and young trees. And if you come back here in 15 years, you'll think it's a woodland that's been here forever. So, and this has been managed like this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Why? Because it's part of the local economy. This is a resource, this is wealth. Because this, when it's cut, can be dried and can be fed to the animals in the winter. It becomes hay. This is a hay field, so it's managed for hay, and it's cut perhaps normally in this area 3 times a year, and then they dry. You've probably seen it, hay. Maybe you feed it to your pet rabbit. But it's what in many parts of Europe and Asia, and that has spread around, has been the agriculture that people have done. Part of their agriculture is having domestic animals, whether it's sheep or goats or cows, etc., that you can then get milk from. You can do all kinds of things. And this is talking about that history. And people for thousands of years who lived here knew exactly what this was, and they knew all the flowers and plants that are in it, because some you can eat, some are good for medicine, some are good for dyeing your materials and your clothes, some are good for making rope or making materials. You need to know the plants and the animals and the place you live. People, all of your ancestors, at some point, not long ago, not many generations ago, would have known the plants and the animals in their community, in their ecosystem where they lived. So anybody in the past would have looked at this and they would have known what it meant. It meant it meant work, because people had to cut this. Because the only way you can keep a meadow as a meadow, so it doesn't, through the process of secondary succession, return to become a woodland, the ecosystem, right, is to either cut it or burn it or graze it. So graze it would be if you have animals here, maybe sheep or maybe horses or maybe cows. Cows and sheep are the main in Europe and Asia. And they selectively graze, because some things they don't like because they're poisonous, like buttercups. Most cattle and sheep won't eat buttercups, they'll leave it. So I look at this and to me it looks like this has been selectively grazed in the past. Perhaps not, I don't know. I'm just making up stories about what I know and what I recognize. And these stories are what connect me to this place. But your ancestors and my ancestors all connected to their places where they were through the community of plants and animals, wild and cultivated, that they lived amongst. And that's what gave their life and their seasons some meaning and some constancy. So even if people were on lockdown, which people were often on lockdown, we're on lockdown now, People lived in lockdown. It was normal in the past. People stayed in one place, or they moved a bit. Not many people moved around a lot. They stayed in their area and they walked, because if you had to get there, it was difficult. You had to walk, or then later on you had to go on a horse. You had to go on a boat. But now we're used to moving all over the place. So why am I saying this? I'm saying that connect ourselves to our landscape through our stories and through knowing who the characters are, the birds, the animals. When I go for a walk, it's like it's an adventure, it's a story. I'm seeing all these things happening and the stories are happening around me, and I'm part of the story, very much. Because if I'm there, the behavior and the energy of where I am will change because I'm there. If I'm not there, I'm not sure what's going on. In fact, in some ways, I'm creating the stories of my reality and my environment as I walk through it, or as I sit in it. Think about meadows for a second, then I'm going to shut up, but just think about this for a sec. Meadows are a place that are associated with all kinds of cultural tropes or things that are important to us that you can imagine, like picnics, like sports. Think of all the sports that are played on grass. Cricket, football, rugby, there's lots of them. Battles, the battlefield. These areas are where people, when they started to fight using horses, whether it was the Mongols, or whether it was in northern India, or whether it was in Europe, and later in America and elsewhere, where people started to have their big fights. When they were doing it on horseback, you can't really fight very well with lots of people on a horseback in a forest, but you can in a stepes, or in a plain, or in a meadow, or in a field. So these kind of landscapes have lots of stories that connect us to our past and to our present and to our imagination. So look out the window, see if you see any buttercups, because they're in the cities too. They're probably in your lawn if you're lucky enough to have a garden and grass. Otherwise, look it up. But lots of things right now in this first flush are yellow. And look at the color. Could you give it a note? What kind of note would that be? What kind of musical sound? What kind of musical signature? What kind of energetic musically would you give this? It's like, to me, it's kind of sulfurous, buzzing sound. So how does that sound? I'm not going to do it because I'm too shy, but I could come up with all kinds of things. And then you got the yellow, it's a particular kind of sound. Then maybe you get this kind of red coming in and some of the other blues coming in. That's kind of like an orchestra. If you could assert each of those colors a tone, a musical note, or perhaps a rhythm, this meadow would start to be musical and would start to sing and talk to you. And in fact, if I shut up, you may hear, already there's music in this meadow. This meadow already has its signature sound, musically speaking, because every ecosystem's got its own musical sound. This one's already got the first crickets. Listen.